Good evening and welcome to April's edition of the Love Shack Chats, where this month we are talking about conscious dating. And right now I'm joined by Darren J Brookes and Goddess Andrea, and we may have some others joining us in the very near future. Time will tell. So I just hand things over to Darren, our guest for this evening, to introduce himself and share a little bit about who he is, what he does, and then we'll go on to Andrea.
Yeah, amazing. How are you doing, guys? My name's Darren Brooks. I'm a coach and author. Wrote 2 books, Dreams to Goals and 23 Rules of Life that most people don't want to hear. First one is about going after those dreams. The second one's about all the madness that's going on in the world, how to navigate it. I'm a dad, and I also run a Seat at the Table men's event and a single dads group. Well, actually, the funding's just finished on that today, so I'm looking at a different direction of taking that in. And that's pretty much me.
Excellent. And Andrea, although I think most of our listeners know who Andrea is, anyone who's come from Darren's audience will not, so I will hand over to Andrea.
I'm Andrea, Goddess Andrea. I'm a Tantra practitioner and a life coach in the love department. Basically, I help you love yourself so that receiving love and giving love becomes a lot easier.
Excellent. And I myself am Alan, as the title thing at the bottom says, the love engineer. I'm a dating and relationship coach, and I work with singles who don't want to be single and couples who are not in a great place. And we're now being joined by the Silver Fox himself, Mr. Joe Horton of the Guild of Dads. Good evening, Joe. How are we doing?
You're not bad yourself, Alan?
Very good, thank you. Very good. So Darren and Andrew have just introduced themselves. So would you like to jump on and share a little about what it is you do?
Yeah, so my name's Joe Horton. I coach primarily professional men and dads. I also run a community for dads called Guild of Dads and run my own podcast, which is the Guild of Dads podcast. So my task and my job, if you like, is to help men in what I call dad improvement, which is improving all aspects of their life, and primarily improving as a man so that they can show up as the best husband, father, and member of society as they possibly can, in a nutshell.
Excellent. And I can honestly recommend his podcast because I've done a lot of driving recently, and whilst I drive, I listen to a lot of podcasts. So I just kind of click play on the very, very first episode and let it go through all the way. So I've actually listened to every single episode of that podcast, and I would recommend it. So especially for us dads. So conscious parenting. My original plan was to throw the ball directly at Nisanka, who's not turned up yet. So conscious parenting. What the heck is that? I'm going to start that off with Andrea.
Well, to me, conscious parenting is allowing your children to be themselves without the judgment of what you were brought up with, or putting limitations on them because this is what you were taught, so this is what you have to teach your children. It's about allowing them to be their own person and bringing that out and developing their own unique skills and being able to hold their hand while they make mistakes instead of preventing them from making mistakes, and doing the follow-up stuff of why that happened. Why did you make that mistake? Like, it could be something as simple as the 5-year-old who cut her own bangs and mom's like, oh my God. But what if we just took that scenario and was like, oh, okay, so next time you do this, instead of getting angry, why don't you ask if you can use the scissors, then we do this together and let her cut her own hair. That's fine. But it's the part where she's sneaking around because she feels like she shouldn't be doing it, but there shouldn't be that feeling in the first place. So conscious parenting would be that 5-year-old coming to you and say, Mommy, I want to cut my hair. And mommy goes, okay, let's cut your hair, instead of, no, you can't do that. I don't want you to look like that. A really cool example of this, my daughter, when she was 10, I believe, she fundraised $1,000 for the cancer fund in our little city that we lived in. And the end of it was she wanted to go to the mall, meet the reporter guy that was talking on the radio, and that guy shaved her head. So she's 10 years old, cute little blonde girl. She shaved her head and raised $1,000 for this cancer fundraiser. Her biological dad told her that she was not allowed to not have hair, and he didn't talk to her for a year because my daughter does not have hair. And he literally disowned her for a year. So of course I had to pick that up and whatever, but that is not conscious parenting. That is, you have a way that your daughter is supposed to look, and you're making your daughter do that, and she didn't want to do that. It just was so wrong, because all of this joy that she created and this massive movement of a young person doing this, it was huge for her. He stole all of her joy out of all that. And she was like, why did I even do that? And I'm like, oh man, but you made just such a great difference. And people were cheering for her and, making her feel really great. And then there's the unconscious parent that stripped her of that joy. It just doesn't work to me, the unconscious parenting and having this view of your child the way that you want them to be, but that doesn't bring out who they truly are.
Yeah. Wow. A whole year of not talking to a child because of a haircut. That's mad.
Right? Like, can you even imagine? I just am like, I'm not that kind of parent anyway.
My kids' mum shaved their heads when they were about 6 months old, because somebody told her it would grow back thicker and quicker. Yeah, I think I'd much rather have not spoke to the mum for a year, let alone not speak to the kids.
Right, but it's just that's just a good level to show of like where we come from and how hard our own limitations hold on to like being passed on in generations. Like I know I made a huge difference in my family generation. I broke a whole bunch of cycles with the way I raised my children. And I mean, I no longer have relationships with my parents because of choosing not to participate in their stuff. And my daughter had that opportunity as well. Her dad is still in her life. They figured it all out. But that took a lot of training and stuff. And he's still very adamant that she needs to be this certain way when she is just a doll on her own. She doesn't need any help. She might need some guidance or some love or whatever. She just needs to figure out who she is. And I think that's the baseline of any parent. If you don't know who you are, how are you parenting your children?
Absolutely. Self-consciousness comes before being a conscious parent.
Yeah, and that's the point of conscious parenting, is so that the children can teach you about who you are, because when you are taking care of someone, you become somebody a little bit different. When you have a baby, you become a little different. Things changed for you. My morals and values never changed, but how I approach things sure did. Like there's things that change, and I really wanted my kids to teach me because I didn't know. And that's the point of conscious parenting, is being able to receive from your children as you are able to give to them.
Absolutely. Joe, your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, I mean, I alluded to dad improvement a little while back, and part of that is allowing the process of fatherhood to change you, and that equally applies to the process of motherhood. It's allowing the process of becoming a parent to you've got a little person that is reflecting back at you, and so it forces parents to look into the mirror and really kind of do some ruthless self-examination as to who they are, what they are, and how they've got to this point. One of the things that really resonated with me in a book that I read by a guy called James Hollis is the statement that the greatest burden for a child to bear is the unlived life of a parent. And I frequently speak to parents that I know, and I can I can actually recall something that happened recently where I'd not seen a dad for a while, and I said to him, "Oh, how are you getting on? How are the kids doing, and whatever." And the first thing he did was to reel off what grades his daughters were getting, what universities they were going to, you know, and I didn't say it to him, but you feel like saying to these people, look, I didn't ask you how your children are doing academically. I asked you how they were. But we slip into this trap of telling people how our kids are doing academically. And that is a prime example of parents vicariously living their lives through their children. And that's not conscious parenting. That is, I'm going to try and live my life through my unlived life through my child. And you know, in certain areas of the UK, you have like what's called a grammar school system where it's where you have to pass tests. You've got kids having extra tuition. You have them being pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, and they're losing their childhood because it's all about the parents. And that's and to Andrea's point, one of the things that I think that conscious parenting takes an awareness on the part of the parent as well, because like I've found myself in situations whereby I'm behaving or acting in a certain way, and I'm like, this isn't me. Where have I learned this from? And I realize that it's behavior that my dad embarked upon. And conversely with my wife, she can stop and pause now, and she can say, where have I learned this behavior? It's behavior that I learned from my mother. And key to breaking the chain, as Andrew alluded to, is having that level of awareness that you can actually say, right, here's a chain here. This is a learned behavior that I've learned from somewhere. I have the power to change that and break that chain and parent in a different way, a more empathetic, compassionate, and understanding way than what I bet my parents did. And that's not to say that my parents did a really bad job. This isn't about castigating the baby boomer generation and saying you were really bad parents. It's about saying, okay, they did what they did with the information that was available to them, and they may have had a differing level of awareness to what I have now. But I have a lot more information available to me now, and I have control over my level of awareness. And so I have a choice as to how I want to bring up my kids. And I think conscious parenting does come down to choice. You have a choice in how you can react and how you can respond and how you can handle different situations, rather than going off on this kind of emotional tailspin, this knee-jerk reaction kind of parenting that we've kind of seen in the past few decades, which is where mum and dad are tired and they just take it out on their kids. And you're like, come on, we've evolved to a greater degree now than just saying, I had a bad day at work, so I'm just going to treat my kids like shit. Actually, no, you can do better than that. You can actually raise your level of awareness to such that you can do a hell of a lot better job than what you're doing. And we all can. And it comes down to ego. It comes down to admitting that we're not perfect and that we can be better. But you have to admit that you're not perfect, and you have to at least give it a go of trying to do better,
Yeah, definitely. Darren, you're sitting nice and quietly there.
Yeah, following on from that, I think it's all about how you're showing up. That's the big one for me. One of the rules in my 23 Rules of Life book is that the most important person in your life is you. And people who are parents can get quite annoyed about that. That no, my kids are the most important person in life. It's like, no, you are the most important person in your life, because without you being at your best, all these people who you love around you aren't getting the best version of you. So and Silver Fox, what was your name that introduced you as though? Sorry,
it's Joe.
Joe, sorry, Joe. As Joe said there, we can take on those beliefs from the family and stuff, from a mum and a dad, and something will come out of my mouth sometimes. I'll think, my dad says that. I can't believe he just said it, but. It's down to that awareness. I'm always trying to be my best, always trying to show up for myself. And your children are watching what you're doing more than listening to what you say. You can say everything till you're blue in the face. You've got parents who are telling the children to chase after the dreams. Well, why are you working in that factory and you absolutely hate it? you're showing your children a complete incongruence there. You've got to be doing what you're advising them to do. I'm telling Ellie that to chase after her dreams, she can be anything she wants to be while chasing after mine and making a part of that journey, and me being a part of her journey. So I think it's been as congruent as you can, but at the same time, showing that we do make mistakes. We're not always perfect. We do skip things that we've promised ourselves we're going to do, and we can disappoint.
Yeah, I'd heard a saying a while back that says, as a parent, it's your job to mess up your kids' lives, and as a parent, it's also your job to limit the amount that you mess up your kids' lives. It's a double whammy, but you're never going to be a perfect parent. They're never going to be a perfect kid. But one of the keys to it, I believe, is actually being present, being in the room at that time, being mindful of yourself and your own actions, and even more importantly, your words. And this goes back to something I heard on Joe's podcast the other day. And the guy was a coach of some kind that works with dads, and he was talking about this like big biker dude who's a single dad, and his son's really struggling with his homework. So he starts getting curious and asking questions. And then the kid comes out and says, well, I can't do my homework because I'm stupid. And the dad's, well, what? That's crazy. Where'd you get that from? And the kid just says, you tell me all the time, Dad. And he never told his son he was stupid again. How often do our parents or our school teachers come out of our mouths when our kids do something that we used to do in the past, and like it's a natural knee-jerk reaction? It just takes a couple of seconds to take that step back and think, okay, how can I respond to this in a positive way that's going to serve both of us?
I love the scene in Pursuit of Happiness where Will Smith says to his son that, oh no, you can't be a basketball player. You're like me, you're lanky. And he stops himself mid-sentence, said, do not ever listen to anybody telling you that you can't do anything, including me. I love how he just catches himself halfway through and then he backtracks it. I think that's a beautiful scene.
Yeah.
It's really cool. I did a little interview with my kids just this week because I'm kind of switching my stuff to parenting coaching right now, because I've had a few people ask me about it because I have really amazing, confident children. And one of the things I asked is like, what was some of the impact that I had coming from such a dysfunctional family, and they've made it through to adults, and they're they have a very high self-worth and self-esteem. And I wanted to touch on that and how they felt like that I helped with that. And my daughter said one of the biggest things, she got bullied a lot in school. And she said, one of the things that you did, Mom, I would wake up and I would look at you and say, like, I can't go to school today. And you would be like, okay. And you'd go run me a bath and you would like call me in sick. And then you'd fight with Dad because Dad didn't think that was right. And I was like, well, so there's something to be said about having a mental health day. And if a teenager can't do it that day, I believe they just can't do it that day. I remember having a really hard time as a teenager. I also lived on the streets and I didn't have that kind of compassionate parent. So how can I make this better for you? You know what? If you need a day that you can't face those people because you're being hurt, that's okay with me. What can I do to make your day better? Run her a bubble bath, make her breakfast, just let her have a good day. And I think a lot of parents don't allow those types of things to happen because you have to go to school. Joe, you had said something about identity too, like knowing who you are. And that I think that that's one of the things that I had no idea who I was when I had my children, but we grew and learned that together. So our morals and our values are very similar, and we respect each other's boundaries. And we can set boundaries with each other. It's allowed in our relationship. Like my son is always telling me I go too far. That's fine. We know I'm going to go too far because that's what I am. But he lets me know when I'm doing that. And then he tells me to back off. And I do, because integrity, practice what you preach. It's okay to set the boundaries as long as I can set them with you too. It's teaching them how to be, how to have boundaries, how to have that, how to be perfect. I disagree with all of you when you say I'm not perfect, because we are perfect. We were brought to this planet perfect. It's just not our situations that have always been perfect. And we need to figure out who we perfectly are for our own perfect self, because there's nobody else like us in the world. So how can you not be perfect? It's just our situations that haven't always been perfect. And I believe if we just strive to do better and be better, and we teach our kids how to do that, I think it would be a lot easier. I see a lot of kids struggling right now with who I am, identity, gender, all that other stuff. But what if you just figure out who you are, and none of that even matters? Take yourself out of that equation. What are your morals and values, and what kind of integrity do you live in to be that person? And how do you teach your children how to do that?
Yeah, I think the best way to teach children is by example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without
And they do pick up on it. And they do pick up on it. I mean, it's like, I read a hell of a lot, and I work out, and the kids kind of pick up on that. You know, my eldest daughter is a vociferous reader. My youngest daughter, you know, she wants to involve herself in the workouts I do from time to time. So they pick up on it, and you're kind of planting little seeds all the time in their kind of subconscious as to what kind of person they're going to be. One of the things that I think is kind of quite tricky at the minute is that I see a lot of parents that see themselves as their kid's best friend. They want to be their kid's best friend, and you're like, actually, no, you're not their best friend. You're their parent. You are the person that is kind of setting an example. You're guiding, you're mentoring, you're allowing them to develop their own uniqueness, their own personality, but you're not kind of their best friend. And I think one of the things that I see that concerns me a little bit, and in his example of not conscious parenting, is where people are looking at themselves as their kid's best friend, and it blurs their judgment in terms of what's in their kid's best interest or not. So a good example of this is, like, you know, phones in schools, for instance, phones in primary schools, and a lot of parents would give their kid a phone because they don't want their kid to feel left out, and they don't want their kid to be the only one that's not got a phone in the class, despite the fact they're a 6 or 7-year-old. So what they do instead is they say, well, I'll give you a phone and unfettered access to the internet 24/7, just because I don't want you to feel left out. And so that kind of subjugates their good judgment as a parent to actually look at it and think, actually, is this a good idea, my kid having a unfettered access to the internet at this age? And all this is about is them wanting to kind of, again, vicariously live their life through their kids. They want their kid to fit in the same way, in the way that they didn't at school and stuff. So what they're willing to do is surrender any good judgment, and operating in their kids' best interest, because they want to be their kids' best friend. And what that causes is a lot of issues, because they're not acting in their kids' best interests. And to me, that is what I would call unconscious parenting, where you're just doing things to fit in with everyone else, rather than it being the right thing to do at the right time.
And what would the odds be on those very same parents 5 years down the line being the ones that say, how do I get my kid to stop having so much screen time, or put the phone down and just listen to me, or have a conversation with me?
Yeah. But again, this kind of, Alan, this extends to like Andrew said, like setting an example. Like, if your kid is sitting there watching you just like surfing the internet on your phone every evening, okay, you're normalizing what you do each evening. Whereas if your kid is seeing you set aside, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes to speak to their mother when you get through the door first of things, and actually sit down and have dinner with them and have a conversation, it becomes a social thing, then it's a completely different example you're setting. But
Yeah.
like to Andrew's point, you've got to practice what you preach. You can't just go around saying, "Oh, you're spending too much time on the internet," when they're watching you sitting on your phone all the time. I mean, I cringe sometimes when I'm standing outside the school gate and I see parents looking down at their like touchscreens as their kids are coming. Like, what does that say to your kid when they come out of the school gates? And I don't know, they've got a painting that they've just done in class, and you're staring down at your phone. It says to them they're not important, and like that you're just totally checked out of the whole experience of greeting them at the end of the day. And I see it every day, and I just like people like, oh yeah, well, you know, it's just something that I do. And you're just like, it's something you unconsciously do. Like if you're conscious, you'd be like, actually, I'm going to stand outside this school gate with my head up, and I'm going to look into the whites of my kids' eyes as they come out of the door, streaming out the gate with all their buddies, you know. So I'm
who doesn't like the after school hug anyway? Like, I think it's really important, the screen time, but even teaching your kids to communicate, not just communicate, but effectively communicate. I learned this when my kids were teenagers. I actually ended up hiring a life coach because I learned that I had no idea how to communicate. And we would have family meetings once a week, no screens, no nothing, and even a talking stick, because we all interrupted. We all put each other down. We all said crappy stuff, and I needed that to stop. And so we literally had to learn how to have and use effective communication. But that's something that you have to actually teach your kids or teach yourself so that you can have that. Like, it's not about, you know, when somebody says to you, oh, who are you? Like you were saying, how are your kids? And then they go off on academic. Well, if somebody says, how are you? Or who are you? What is the first thing we refer to? Our job. I'm a mom. I'm all these labels, but who are you? And when you learn those things, communication becomes easier. Like the effective communication, being able to ask those hard questions, being able to say, that's okay, you just made a mistake. What can we do better next time? And like work it out together. It doesn't even matter the kid's age. I believe a 6-year-old can come up with a solution if you allow him or her to do so. They're brilliant. They're so brilliant at young ages.
Yeah.
I love that you did that. That's amazing that you did that. Yeah, you know, what a thing to do. And people don't. That sort of sitting down and eating the meal and stuff, things like that are a bit of a dying tradition. Just going back off what Joe said earlier, saying, you know, about those parents that are doing it. I saw something the other day, and the guy was like, my son's bordering on obese. I don't know what to do. And Andy Fasala, I don't know if you know him, he's quite brutal. He's like, look in the fucking mirror. That's exactly what you need to do. Look in the mirror, and you'll see why your son's obese. And the guy was massive, you know, when he wanted his son lose weight, and he's not setting that example, so he's not going to follow that, regardless of what you're saying. Son, go out playing. Well, Dad, you sit on your arse all day watching Netflix, drinking beers, and eating takeaways. So why am I going to go out playing football? How about grab the ball? How about grab the ball and take your son out?
Yeah, I think family nights are really important. It doesn't matter where you're at, like having one night a week or one night every couple of weeks. We used to take our kids on dates just to do the one-on-one time with them, you know, like that wasn't just routine stuff at home. It'd be like, okay, we're going to go on a date. What do you want to do? And with Dad, they always went like on a bike or a walk or some sort of sport to play. And with me, it was like meditate and have some deep conversations and go for dinner or something. I think it's really important when families too, sometimes I've noticed with people, they don't necessarily pay attention to each individual child. They just take it as a whole, and this is how we're doing this for everyone, and each child needs something different. And that's what I learned in my parenting experience, was getting to know what each child liked, and then getting them to do the more of those things that they seem to be good at or they excelled at, and they want, because as they felt good about it, they wanted more of it. And that as a parent, I think that was my job, to help them become the best version of themselves, rather than, I mean, I'm so glad I didn't raise them the way I was raised, because it would be a gong show. So I had this awesome opportunity to create a generational change in my family, and I did. And it was not easy, but at least it worked. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. Kids don't come with a bloody manual, right? They just come. Here you go. Good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah, too true.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
And I
hardest
think-
job and the
amazing how-
most rewarding job, and only our own examples to go off, really, as well. But it was funny. We run a mastermind on a Wednesday night, and there's 4 of us on there. And we got on the discussion of parents and stuff the other day, and every single one of us had amazing things and issues with what our parents had done. And we were saying it'd be funny that our kids are sat here in 20 years' time who will be saying exactly the same, the good stuff that we did, and also the issues, because we're not perfect. Although I know you say we are, Andrea, but
I do think we are.
Perfect in our
It's
own
just,
imperfections.
yeah, you're perfectly you. And it's just about defining and redefining you over and over again so you can show up as that best person that you want to be. I know didn't have a clue what I was doing when it came to parenting. I didn't even know how to life. Like, I don't even know how I got blessed with these 2 children. So I got these 2 kids. I got to create something different. And I asked them if they remember, like, me going through my depression and that stuff. And they're like, yeah, Mom, you used to sleep a lot, but it didn't seem to impact us, because if I wanted to see you, I would just come in your room and you would always cuddle with us or talk to us or whatever. I never rejected them, right? They were allowed to come into my space. Just because I was dealing with depression didn't mean that I had to reject my children. But sometimes that happens too when we are going through something as a parent. And I had no idea how to, like, parent properly. As soon as I had a baby, I ran the parenting classes and I got this piece of paper that had, like, all the emotions on it. And I'm like, oh my God, did you know there was this many emotions? And so my job was to learn them and teach them to my kids, like, how are you feeling? And I would pull out the stuff when they were really young and I'd say it all to them. They have an emotional bank that's full of all kinds of feelings they can feel, because I never got to have that. So I gave that to them. So then it's easier for them to say, I feel this, instead of, why do you always have to do that? Right? It's what we choose to change. Like, I know lots of people who grew up with really great parents and they're still looking for ways to change because they don't like the voice in their head that their parents said to them. And that's something that I actually consciously do, is when I hear something in my head, I used to always stop and have the pause and say, whose voice is this? It would be my mom or dad, or somebody that wasn't a positive influence in me. And then I would want to say that to my kids, and I would literally stop myself just in the middle of it and be like, I need a minute to figure this out. So I can't talk to you right now. I don't know how many times I did that to my kids, because I had to go recollect myself, because I didn't want to repeat the same pattern. It took me a minute to figure out how to change it. If we take that time and we create that change and we allow our children to just grow and be and do, life just seemed a lot easier. There wasn't fighting. There wasn't, like, of course you have your little arguments and disagreements, but in what relationship do you not? Like, there's always, to me, that's just relationships. But allowing children to speak their mind and say what they're feeling and recognize feelings, and allow them to have those feelings, sit in their feelings, and learn how to, okay, I'm sad right now. Like, my son's 24 and he has no problem crying, because it's always been okay. It's not, you're a man, you can't cry. It's like, you feel like crying, cry. Let it out. Because if you harbor it in, later on, you're going to get angry at somebody for some dumb reason, and it's just going to explode somewhere else. So be what you need to be in that moment so that you don't harbor crap inside of you, right? We as humans don't do that very well. So teach your children to do that, which also means you have to practice doing it.
And a good thing that links into that, Andrew, as well, is that, like, I've noticed that a lot of guys in middle age are doing what I would term shadow work. So they're kind of working on their shadow. And when you learn about shadow work, you learn that it forms in childhood. It's the kind of things that you kind of keep secret and you hide from the world because you're scared that people won't accept you as you are if you were your real self. And it's interesting how once you realize that as like a parent, you're like, actually, I'm leaving an imprint on my kids if I don't actually, if I carry on doing what my parents did. And again, it comes back to not castigating your parents for doing a bad job, but actually taking what they did that worked and jettisoning the bits that didn't and improving those. So it's kind of, it's a constant process of gradual refinement. And just like Darren's point, where he said that, you know, our kids may be looking back in a few years' time, thinking, oh, we did a crap job. But if we can tap into that awareness, that I think that will minimize the chances of that happening.
Yeah, I don't think it's much a crap job, but I think there'll always be something where
I know what you
they
mean.
don't like what we did, and you know, the stuff we do, and I love that, taking those bits that worked and getting rid of the ones that didn't, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's what life's about as well.
Yeah. And Andrew's point about having one-on-one time with the kids, I've got this kind of graphic which I can share with you guys, but I call it the family dynamic rebalancer, which is kind of to help people, and it's mainly for what I call for helping people with like what I call parental martyrdom, which is where everything revolves around the kids. And so basically it helps families to kind of rebalance the dynamic. So so I get people to try and incorporate as many of the things over a typical month, and it typically includes each mum and dad having time out by themselves, mum and dad having date nights together, having family time, having one-to-one time with the kids, mum having time out with her girlfriends, dad having time out with their boyfriends. So you begin to kind of put into place healthy relationship dynamics both within and outside the family. But in terms of setting an example, it also sets an example to the kids as to what healthy individuality looks like. Because one of the curses of parenthood is what I call parental martyrdom, which is where everything revolves around the kids, and mum and dad don't have a life of their own. They don't have any interests, and it kind of becomes like this really kind of suffocating pressure cooker situation whereby everyone's stressed, everyone's anxious, no one's getting a break. And it's this weird kind of belief that parents have that if they take time out from being a parent, then they're somehow a bad parent, or they're neglecting their kids, or, you know, it's this irrational belief that we all have. But in actual fact, to Darren's point where he said about and the way I put it is putting yourself first and prioritizing what's important to you. It means that you can show up as you can recharge your batteries, show up as the best mum and dad that you can be. You can show a solid marriage to your kids, and you can role model that to them so as they know what a solid marriage looks like. Because if mum and dad are not getting their needs met outside the relationship, that is and outside the family unit, that is going to have a negative impact. So conscious parenting doesn't just mean how you parent your kids. It means how you look after yourself, how you look after your relationship with their mother, and a host of other things which have a trickle down effect into their own lives and how they see the world and how they see relationships and family dynamics, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so many relationships crumble because of that, don't they? That everything's about the kids, and the relationship just falls apart.
Yeah.
I saw a post in a dad's Facebook group, right? And it was a guy who was asking for help because his marriage was breaking down. And people chimed in and said, yeah, what about this? What about that? And he said, we've accepted that our marriage is on pause until the kids get older. And you're like,
wow,
come again?
Wow.
Like,
no way.
What?
You have to think about what you're teaching your kids and what they're seeing. I always did that. Like, I did end my marriage when we were about to have emptiness nest syndrome. Like, I didn't have that because I left at that time. But even both of my children, we actually talked about that this week, and they both said me leaving was the best for him and for me. And they saw it, but they were also older. It had a huge impact on them still, even though they were older children. My daughter was already moved out of the house. It still impacted her. But she says now, like, it's been 7-8 years since I've been divorced, and they said who we are now as individual people are way better than when we were together. And they see that, and they saw it. They knew it was probably going to happen at some point growing up because we didn't get along very well. So it's really interesting to talk to your kids about it later when they're grown up and ask, like, you know, what was it that I did that stood out? What was it? What do you remember? And the things that my kids keep telling me is that no matter what, I never gave up on them. I constantly pushed myself to be better because they know where I come from. I lived on the streets and my abusive background and all of that dysfunction. And I didn't bring that into our relationships. I didn't hold them guilty as I was held guilty first, right? So I just let them make the mistakes. And then I think that as a parent, you have to own that you can't do something, or you have to own that you don't know something. And sometimes that's hard to swallow. But when you actually say, I don't know how to do this, and then you find the help to do it, you are helping your children so much more and yourself. But I do believe our relationship with our children is just that, a relationship, not like a best friend or anything. You're there as a parent. There is an umbrella with that word parent and what that looks like, and showing and sharing and developing a really strong relationship. Because, like, I don't talk to my mother. I can't imagine not talking to my children. Like, that's not even possible in my mind space to think about. Like, I will do everything it will take to create a really strong relationship so that we can enjoy this life together and journey together, rather than having to fit inside of some box that you don't fit inside and have to do things that make you uncomfortable. That's not okay in my relationship world. I don't want you to walk on eggshells near me, and I don't want to have to walk on eggshells around you. And you need to teach your children that too. They just need to be open and honest, and you have to be willing to accept the honesty, especially if it's something that you didn't want them to do, but they did it anyway, because we're human and that's what we do, and that's how we learn.
Yeah.
They're still human. I think little children or teenagers, they're still humans. Just treat them like humans, and life is good.
Yeah. Are they little people, or are we just big children?
Right? Do we have to grow up?
You don't have to grow up. The only thing you don't have a lot of choice in is growing older. But why that's such a thing to celebrate instead of the internal growth, I don't know. So
I really like getting older. I think probably because I had such a crappy upbringing. I remember always wanting to be 30. And then when I turned 30, we had bought a house and had this big party, and it was just so fun. And like, I'm going to be 50 in a couple of years, and I'm so excited to be 50. Like, I think getting older is like a prize in life. It's like, I don't know how people are like, oh God, I'm getting old. And I'm like, aren't you excited about that? Like, doesn't life get better
Yeah,
as you
I'm
get
on your
older?
page,
Like,
Andrea. Yeah, I'm on your page.
Yeah,
yeah,
it
like,
changes. It changes, doesn't it? It changes. I like. I think I read last year the kind of the first part of life is like the ego journey of the haves and obtainings and getting, and it's chasing after stuff. And then the second part of life is like the soul journey, where it's a journey into yourself, if you like, that you kind of that's what life is calling you towards. And digressing off the subject, that it's resisting that call at midlife that causes a lot of people anguish, because they're like, no, I want to operate on this 1995 operating system, even though it's 2023, and they're kind of clinging desperately to it, even though something else is pulling them forward. They're kind of like holding on to that past, so existential
I can't
crisis.
follow my dreams because I've got kids.
Yeah, different. It's different strokes for different folks, isn't it?
I think if your kids see you striving and following your dreams, they'll have more momentum to go get it themselves too. I know we traveled a lot. I was an esthetician and a hairdresser, and my husband was a hairdresser, and we did a lot of stage presentations across North America. And my kids got to participate in that and see that. And I think that, we've talked about it too. And they're like, well, Dad traveled a lot, Mom. He was gone a lot. And I'm like, yeah, but whenever we could, we'd go with them and we would be there so that you could see what that success looks like. And they got to be part of it. Like there was never a time where the kids were around and he wouldn't call them up on stage, you know, getting them used to that whole environment in life. And it was just really cool. Like I didn't realize how big of an impact it would have now, like that they're grown, because in the moment it was like seemed like a lot of work, and it was like getting them on the airplane and then getting through all the show stuff plus having to take care of your kids while you're working, and it's like it was a lot sometimes. But then now talking to them, they're like, Mom, that was the best experience. We got to watch you guys live out your dreams and traveling and presenting and doing all this stuff, and we got to be part of that. And so that gave them permission to follow their dreams and do what you want, you know, because we loved our careers. We love, and you could see it, like we were passionate about it. So we got to share that. They got to see their parents have passion.
Yeah.
And our life was really fun because of those things.
Yeah. And it's memory
Yeah,
creation as well.
essential.
It's the art of memory creation, because I think the thing is we your time with your kids is kind of finite. You know, I think there's some statistic that you'll have spent most of the time with them that you're going to spend in their entire lives up to a certain age. And so, like, to give you an example, we got a caravan the other year, okay, and it's a small little box on wheels, but it's something that facilitates memory creation. So we're going to create memories going on different adventures. It's something a little bit different. You know, we're not tied to communication when we're going on holiday in the caravan. It's kind of like it's just mum and dad switch off. The kids have got a bit more freedom and stuff. But it's a way to facilitate memories. And again, I think that sometimes people think that, oh, actually, I need to spend loads of money and I need to go take my kids to Legoland and I need to take them to Disney and I need to take them to all these places in order to create memories. You don't actually. It's just you spending time with them. Kids want your presence, not your presence. And people
This is
laugh
so
at
true.
me. Yeah. And people laugh when I say that because, yeah, my kids like gifts and that as well. I'm like, no, you're not getting what I'm saying here. They want you more than anything else. And when at Christmas, the kids say, well, what do you want for Christmas? And this sounds cheesy, but I'm like, actually, being with you guys is the biggest present that I can have. So, you know, I don't get me what you want to get me. I don't care. But I think that, again, coming back to conscious, if you're constantly distracted or you're looking at a screen or you're doing something else, you're robbing them and yourself of the opportunity to create memories, which is
Absolutely.
and when you get older, like, you know, when you're kind of towards the end of your life and you're maybe in a hospital bed and stuff and you're contemplating what your life's been, that's all you have at the end of the day is memories. So you just don't want to squander that and in being unconscious, whatever
Right.
way, shape or form that takes.
Yeah, they're not going to remember any of those presents. They're going to remember those times, aren't they? That's the bottom line.
Yeah. And that's what
Yeah,
I
it was-
remember.
I was
That's
never
what-
a big fan of Santa. Santa was out the door of my house as far. Like, I hated lying to my kids. First of all, I'm not good at lying, and I hated lying to them about it. So I was so excited when my son said, Mom, is Santa real? I'm like, hell no, it's me. And that's why he gives you crappy presents, because my presents need to be better. I'm like, but can we ditch Christmas now and go travel? And so from there, that's where we created our experiences. Instead of spending the $1,000 on presents, we spent it on a trip. We'd go snowboarding almost every year for Christmas. They got to go somewhere, either US or Canada. We would travel for 12, 15, 18 hours and spend a week snowboarding, and they got to take lessons. Or we would go to Cancun, or we would go, like, it was more about what can we do instead of these stupid presents. Like, the experiences that they had growing up. To me, when I tell people that I don't even like to participate in Christmas, and I still don't participate in presents. My son's birthday just passed and we're going to go to a rage room or something. We find something to do together instead of a present. We'll have dinner together or whatever. But as adults, they don't need very much stuff anymore. They might need some money, but they just ask for that when they need it. It's not like you have to wait for a birthday for that. If you need help, ask for it, right? And so I've said, can we just have experiences instead of presents? They've all agreed to that. So we go do something fun instead of a present. We just spend 2 hours, go for dinner, go to a movie. I'm not a big fan of movies because you don't really interact, but there's like golfing, indoor golfing, and rage rooms, axe throwing, all these fun things that we can go do, and we go do them. So, and I really enjoy that more than giving them a present. I like the whole experience of presents. To me is just I've never been a present person. Like I'm a practical person. So Mother's Day, they always say, "What do you want for Mother's Day?" I'm like, windshield wipers for my car, because that's a good time to replace them, and that's really honestly all I want. Like,
And that's quite a good time to cut in and say that we'll be drawing this session to a close in a minute. And something that's just come up for me, which actually in a way kind of triggered my conscious dating parenting journey when my kids were only, I think they were about 1 year old. And this lesson came from the most dysfunctional dad that's ever come out of, well, probably anywhere really, a guy called Ozzy Osbourne. And I was watching this documentary, and he was reminiscing about this fight he had with his son. And this by the time his son's been on drugs and got clean and everything else. And Ozzy's words to him: "How can you speak to me like that? I've given you everything. I've given you the cars. I've given you the house. I've given you this. I've given you that." And and his son just looks him straight in the face and said, "Yeah, you've given me everything except an effing dad." And at that point, Ozzy decided to get clean. I was like, I ain't having my kids say that to me. What can I do differently?
Yeah, what can I do different? How can I be better and do better? That's my 2023 motto. Do better, be better.
Absolutely. Any closing thoughts from the Silver Fox or Mr. Brookes?
Listen. I think I agree with Andrea. Again, we can do better, and we can be better. And I think it and the bottom line is it takes self-reflection. It takes looking at yourself closely. It takes reflecting on your background. You know, how you were brought up. What were the good bits? What were the bad bits? What were the bits you want to continue? Where could you, where can you improve? And part of maturing and growing up is being able to park your ego at the door and do that. Look in the mirror and say, I could have done that better, or where could I improve, or what can I learn, or how can I develop in a way that is going to benefit me personally, but also is going to benefit my marriage and how I operate as a parent. And to not be frightened of that. I see a lot of guys now who they follow what everybody else is doing because they don't want to stick out like a sore thumb. They don't want to stand out from the crowd. And this is something we learned when we were at school. But in order to, in my view, in order to be a conscious parent and in order to be the best parent, you must be willing to actually swim against the tide, do things a little bit differently. And if that means making some tough decisions sometimes that are unpopular, specifically with your kids, then you may well have to do that. But that is the cost of being a conscious parent.
Beautiful.
I mean, it's, work on yourself, work on becoming the best version of yourself every day, and your kids will do the same. And no matter what they want to do, encourage it. I mean that in a career sense, obviously, not if they want to go jumping on the train line or something, but whatever they want to do with their life, encourage that, even if it's something that doesn't fit with what you want to do. The amount of parents you see, as Joe spoke about earlier, that are living their dreams through the children. They want to be this amazing piano player or footballer, so they're sending the kid to football practice all the time or piano lessons. Let them be who they are and encourage what they want to do. And I think you can't go wrong. Well, we probably can, but hey,
And finally,
You're an
Andrea,
amazing speaker,
last
Tesla.
closing words.
I just think do the best you can. And if you don't know how to do something, there is a ton of help out there. Like all of us in this room could help anyone struggling, especially apparently the men have a lot of support here. So this is wonderful to see and hear because I think it's really needed in our world for men to step up and be better and do better as well. There's just so much around men sometimes that they're conditioned to do so much stuff that's different than what I see. But just get help if you need it in being a conscious parent, and take it easy on your kids. Like they really deserve a good, healthy life with healthy relationships. And if it's not healthy, make it healthy for them and get yourself healthy so you can share what healthy is, because we need the dysfunction to stop in this world. I still don't understand why it's still going on, but it's because I think honestly, self-love. Love yourself first enough to be able to share that and how to do that. Set boundaries.
Beautiful. And on that note, I will draw the boundary for this session. And we'll see you next
Amazing
month.
stuff.
Cheers, Alan.